If you're listening to this the week of Thanksgiving, you're probably just trying to make it to the break. Maybe you've already mentally checked out. Maybe you're counting down the hours until you can stop thinking about lesson plans and grading and just be with your family. And if you're a multi-prep teacher, there's a good chance you're also feeling something else. Invisible. Because here's the thing, unless someone has multiple preps, really taught them, not just observed them or taught a couple of different but still related courses, they don't always understand what this job actually requires. And for a long time, I didn't know how to explain it. I just felt exhausted and overwhelmed, like maybe I was doing something wrong because everyone else seemed to be managing fine. But here's what I've learned, both as a multiple prep teacher and then later as an administrator. You're not doing anything wrong. The job is just different in ways that are hard to see from the outside. So today, I want to talk about what I wish people understood about multi-prep teaching. Not so you can go and complain to your admin or your colleagues, but so you can stop questioning yourself, so you can name what's true and maybe feel a little less alone. Welcome to the Secondary Teacher Podcast, the podcast for middle and high school teachers juggling multiple preps to get the strategies to reduce overwhelm so that you don't have to choose between being an effective teacher and prioritizing important relationships. I'm your host, Kristen Masick, a 10-year high school engineering teacher, former middle school assistant principal, and teacher coach. Every week, we will discuss strategies, systems, and time-saving tips to help you not only survive but thrive as a multiple prep teacher. Let's start with that thing that took me the longest to understand about myself, the mental switching. Every teacher deals with decision fatigue, and when you're a multi-prep teacher, especially if you're teaching elective classes with different content, different standards, different skill sets, you're not just making decisions, you're completely switching gears multiple times a day. For example, I'd go from teaching robotics, so programming, building, troubleshooting, to architectural drafting and design, to principles of engineering, which was basically a hands-on physics class, to mechanical drafting. Yes, they're all technically under the engineering umbrella, but the skills are different. The vocabulary is different. The way students engage with the content is different. The assessments are different. Your brain doesn't just switch. It has to let go of one entire framework, the lesson structure, the pacing, the expectations, what you're looking for in student work, and pick up another one. And that takes energy, real measurable energy. And for years, I thought I was just bad at managing my time. I thought if I were just more organized, it wouldn't feel so hard. But then I started learning about decision fatigue and cognitive load, and I realized, oh, this isn't a character flaw. This is just what happens when you ask your brain to do so much switching. And once I understood that, I stopped beating myself up about it. And I started building in systems to protect my mental energy instead of just trying to power through. Here's another thing I had to learn to make peace with. Sometimes your actual classroom has to transform between classes. I remember so many times when I would finish teaching one class and I'd have 4 minutes. They did the research, and when we gave the students 5 minutes, they were having much more issues in the hallway than when we gave them 4 minutes and they were still able to go to class. So 4 minutes it is. But to completely reset my lab or classroom for the next group of students. Maybe I needed to clean up all of the tools from the last project and set out different materials from the next one. Maybe I needed to rearrange the desks because this class needed small groups and the last class needed rows. Maybe I just needed to put away everything from architecture and pull out everything for engineering design. And here's what I wish I had understood earlier. That's why I couldn't always be out in the hallway greeting students. When I became an administrator, I was so grateful when teachers could be in the hallway. It really does help with the management of passing time and minimizes the issues that happen in the hallways. It makes a big difference. But having been on both sides of this, I understand that there are times when you physically cannot be in the hallway because you are trying to reset your entire learning environment in 4 minutes. Now, looking back, I wish I had built in an end of class routine with my students to help with that. Like having the previous class help reset the room before they left. That would have been so much better. But in the moment, when you're just trying to survive, you don't always think of those things. What I learned, though, is that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to build systems that make this easier. And it's okay to not be in the hallway every single day if you're using that time to set up your students for success. Now, let's talk about grading. Multiple prep teachers typically have the same number of students as everyone else. Class sizes are what they are. But here's the difference. When you're grading, you're not grading 120 of the same assignment. You're grading 30 of this assignment, 30 of that assignment, 30 of another assignment, and 30 of yet another assignment, which means you're mentally switching tasks over and over again while you're grading. You're switching rubrics, you're switching expectations, you're switching even what you're looking for. And on top of that, if you're teaching electives, there's often a different grading procedure or a different end-of-level assessment for each course. So it's not just different content, it's different systems. For me, the breakthrough came when I stopped trying to grade everything the same way. I started asking myself, what is the simplest way to assess whether students are learning this? Sometimes that was completion grades during class, so I didn't have to take anything home. Sometimes that was project-based checkpoints instead of one big final grade. Sometimes that was just being more strategic about what I graded for accuracy and what I graded for effort. And if you want to hear more in depth about saving time with grading, go back and listen to episode 307, which aired earlier this month. The point is, I stopped comparing my grading load to what other teachers were doing and started figuring out what actually worked for my situation. And that made all the difference. Here's the thing I don't think people realize about multiple prep teachers, especially elective teachers. There's this balance you're constantly trying to maintain between completely overwhelmed and also making your courses great so that students will sign up again next year or even just tell their friends. Because if enrollment drops, you might have to pick up another prep. So you're already drowning, but you're also trying to make your class engaging and exciting and worth taking. For a long time, that felt like this impossible pressure, like I had to be on all the time or my job was at risk. But then I realized something. The reason students come back isn't because every single lesson is perfect. It's because they feel seen, they feel supported, and they're learning something that matters to them. And I could do that even when I was tired, even when I was reusing lessons, even when I was just showing up and being consistent. So I stopped trying to reinvent the wheel every year, and I started focusing on relationships and the systems that actually made my classes work. And my enrollment stayed strong, not because I was doing more, but because I was doing the right things. And then there's scheduling. I remember being in my year 6 of teaching, and I was mentoring a newer teacher, and our counselor was trying to put together the master schedule for the next year. So she kept pressuring him to teach more sections of every single class he offered instead of realizing that it would be so much better for him and for students if he taught more sections of the intro class and then funneled students into the intermediate and advanced levels. She did the same thing to me once. She accused me of not seeing the big picture because I wanted to offer a bunch of intro sections and build my program from the ground up. But what she wanted was for me to teach split courses, 2 different college level dual enrollment courses in the same class period at the same time so that students would have a better opportunity of getting their associate's degree upon high school graduation. And she genuinely did not understand the amount of work, time, and effort that would require. Now, here's what I wish I had done differently in those conversations. I wish I had been clearer about the trade-offs. Instead of just saying, that's too hard, I wish I had said, if I teach split courses, I won't be able to provide the level of support students need to be successful in a college-level class. Let me show you what that would look like in practice. Because the truth is, scheduling is complicated. There are a lot of competing priorities, but the people making those decisions often don't have the full picture of what those decisions cost. And it's not complaining to name that. It's advocating for what's best for students and for sustainable teaching. So here's the shift that changed everything for me. I stopped waiting for people to understand and started building systems that worked for me anyway. I stopped comparing my workload to single prep teachers and started figuring out what I needed to be sustainable. I stopped feeling guilty for not doing things the way other teachers did them and started making decisions based on what actually worked for my students and my sanity. And honestly, that's when teaching got better. Not easier necessarily, but better. Because I stopped spending so much energy trying to prove I was doing enough and started using that energy to actually teach. So why am I telling you all of this? Not because I think anyone's going to fix your schedule this week, not because I think you're going to march into your principal's office tomorrow and demand a different support. You're in survival mode right now. You're just trying to make it to Thanksgiving, and that's okay. But I want you to know this. You're not imagining it. The job is different. You're not just disorganized or bad at time management or not cut out for this. You're doing a job that requires more mental energy, more physical energy, and more logistical juggling than most people realize. And the fact that you're still showing up, the fact that you're still trying, that matters. But also, and this is important, you don't have to keep doing things the way you've been doing them just because that's how it's always been done. You can ask for help. You can build systems that make this easier. You can advocate for what you need, and you can let go of the things that aren't serving you or your students. Maybe not this week, maybe not even this semester, but eventually. Now, I'm not going to give you a big list of things to do right now because you don't have the bandwidth for that. And honestly, right now is not the time. But maybe in January, when you've had a break and you're in that rejuvenation phase where you're thinking about fresh starts, maybe then, if you get the chance to have a conversation with your admin or your department head about scheduling or planning time or support, here are a few things I wish I'd known to say. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for equitable support. Because that's what it is. You're not asking for less work. You're asking for acknowledgement that the work that you're doing requires different kinds of support. When I have similar courses back to back, I can be more present for students and more effective in the hallway. Frame it in terms of what's better for students and for the school culture, because that's true, and it's harder to argue with. Building in transition time between different preps isn't about me getting a break. It's about students getting a teacher who's mentally ready to teach them. Again, frame it around what's best for learning, because when you're mentally scattered from switching gears without any buffer time, your teaching suffers. That's not a character flaw, that's psychology. You don't have to use those exact words. You don't have to say anything at all right now, but maybe tuck them away for later, for when you have the energy, for when you have the opportunity. Here's what I want you to take away from this episode. If you're feeling invisible, you're not alone. And it's not because you're doing anything wrong. The job is just different in ways that are hard to see from the outside. But that doesn't mean you have to keep struggling in silence. You can build systems that work for you. You can advocate for what you need. You can let go of what's not working. And you can do all of that without feeling guilty about it. So if you're in the US, take your Thanksgiving break, rest, step away from school for a few days if you can, and know that someone out here sees you. Someone out here gets it. And when you're ready, not now, but when you're ready, there are ways to make this more sustainable. There are ways to make this work. You're doing an incredible job with an incredibly hard thing, and you don't have to do it alone. If today's episode was helpful to you, it could be for others. So make sure you share it with your colleagues and tag me on Instagram at Kristen Masick, KRistenMassic. Until next week.